everybody wants to get united. Like, what we gotta do is meet everybody on 149th Street at the bench.
Hey dudes, welcome back to the bench. Today I got something special for you because we're gonna be doing a rating video, but with a bit of a twist. You guys submitted a bunch of amazing graffiti over on Instagram, and I thought a cool way to help you guys out would be to do a draw over on top of your sketches. So we have 4 people today that we're gonna be checking out, and I'd like to focus on, when I can, shifting just 1 or 2 fundamentals while keeping the structure predominantly the same to show you guys how much of a drastic effect that can have on your graffiti. So let's hop right into it with our very first one. Now here's a piece I really enjoyed. I love everything from the fill-in, the 3D, and the letter structures. I love that old school aesthetic that they're pulling off here, and they are pulling it off. They're doing a great job. But let's make some really minor adjustments. First things first, I want to keep the DNA of the letters. I really want to keep the overall aesthetic, but we need to make some tweaks. One of the first fundamentals that really sticks out is the letter name weight, and the inconsistency with certain basic boxes as far as width is concerned. We see that the K gets really thin in certain areas and very bold in other areas, and while this is fine, this is okay, when we compare it to the Y has a lot of weight, despite the fact that much of its structure is really thin. So I want to kind of bring things a little bit closer in line with one another by bulking up certain areas. First things first though, let's bring these letters a little bit more in line with one another by making sure they're roughly the same size and have roughly the same amount of weight. We're going to begin by taking the stem of the K and reaching it up a little bit higher towards the cap line. And we're going to make some of its features a little bit larger, like its extension at the top and the bottom, but we're also going to take the leg of the K and we're going to kick it a little bit further down. This is going to give us a little bit better of an opportunity to have a more drastic of an angle when the K begins to kick underneath the O, adding a little bit more diamondism to that area. The O doesn't have much weight in his sketch, and I actually kind of like that because the K cradling underneath it and the extension from the Y are going to help to compensate, fill in negative space around the O. The O doesn't need a lot of weight in this instance, so I'm cool with keeping it a little bit smaller. The Y, however, has a little bit too much weight, so what we're going to do is, weirdly enough, we're going to actually thicken the stem of the Y, making it a little bit more bold. This is where the Y has a lot of its stability, so we're not really adding weight to the parts that are not stable, like the 2 arms going off to the side. We're adding weight to a place that's pretty kind of grounded, so that weight right there isn't going to be as detrimental to the letter. We're also going to extend the stem just a little bit, that way we can have that heart shape be a little bit lower. From there, we're going to slightly shrink down the top left and the top right of the Y, and we're going to let the 3D do a lot of the work there, filling in a lot of the negative space that the structure used to fill in. Now, one thing we are going to change about the O had this very strange kind of blockiness to the top of it, something that didn't really make sense as an extension, and it didn't really fit as the structure, despite the fact that it appeared to be part of the structure. So we're going to scrap that and we're going to give it a more typical functioning structure for its top. And instead what we're going to do is we're going to check out the top left of the K, where he has this circular chip that happens there. It only happens once in this image, and we want that to happen a few more times. This is a great opportunity to fill in the area above the O that used to be taken up by that blocky bit, and instead fill it up with that circular chip. From there, we need 1 more of these circular chips, so we're going to add 1 more to the bottom right of the piece. Once again, really small changes, but a very drastic effect. Let me know what you guys think. This koi piece, I'm really digging the old school aesthetic of everything, but there are some really basic fundamental flaws here, so I think a 5, maybe a 6 out of 10 is perfect for this. Also, everybody in this video is linked down below. And while you're down there checking out these amazing artists, be sure to check out our holiday sale that's still going on over on the artistblock.inc. It's the perfect time to pick up the best how to do graffiti book anywhere on the market. It's the only one that teaches you all of graffiti's fundamentals, and it'll help you develop your style or help you get out of the toy phase if you're brand new to graffiti. We have ebooks on the online store and physical copies over on Amazon, but fair warning, the sale isn't happening on Amazon. I don't have any control of what happens over there, but physical copies on Amazon, digital copies on the online store where the sale is. Erska here submitted a beautiful mural where he's got a zombie on the left-hand side. He's got his letters all in black with a green outline. When we turn this picture black and white, we see that there isn't a lot of contrast. Sure, he's got the deep black letters, but that kind of blends in with certain areas of the background, and then the actual outline itself blends in with not only many areas of the background, but also many different areas of the 3D. So one of the very first things I wanted to do was go ahead and add more contrast between not only the letters, which is going to be, you know, still black, I'm not going to change the actual fill-in, but the outline and the 3D as well. Now, there's a few different ways we can do this. We can either have a darker outline that will help us convey that the moonlight is kind of shining light towards the piece, so our piece is actually backlit, meaning our outline would be darker, or we can choose to focus the contrast between the actual letter structures themselves and the outline to help define more letter structure. Really, the choice is yours here. You have a little bit of artistic freedom. I chose to go with a lighter outline. That way we have a little bit more variation with the actual 3D itself. Now, we did keep the 3D one solid color in this image, but you would be free to go ahead and shade it how you see fit. And the value of the 3D is slightly lighter than the background areas peeking through the negative space between the letters, but it's also slightly darker than the value directly above the letters, which is going to help the 3D and the letters as a result pop out from the actual background itself. It's not much of a change, but it's enough to add a little bit of contrast. My next big focus were these areas right here, areas where we wanted a little bit more space, because negative space builds letter structure and we need that space inside of our letters. One of the major ways we're going to do this is we're going to thin down these areas here. By thinning these down, we're not going to change the structure too much, and we're going to open up more space between different letters, which is going to help define structure. Not to mention the fact it's also going to give our 3D a little bit more room to breathe, which is going to help to add more depth. We also wanted to focus on these areas right here where lines get a little bit muddy, they get a little confusing and they blend together. You can't really always tell what's happening here. And once again, we're going to want to focus on space in these areas. Space is the name of the game, and you'll notice by just thinning down the letter structures in certain areas and slightly changing the angle in which our basic box is connected, we're able to add an immense amount of space to these letters, which is going to not only give us a more clear visual, a little bit more clarity to our letters, but it's also going to give us a lot more room for certain letter structures to kind of expand, like the lower part of our S here. Keep in mind, the letter structures haven't changed at all. All of the aesthetics are still there, all of the serifs and like the extensions that he has, and just the letter structure in general is all kept the same. But just by simply adding negative space and changing the angle of certain basic boxes, we're able to make drastic changes to the overall image. Now, overall for this Erska piece, we gotta give this a solid like 9 or 10 out of 10. I love the overall mural with the zombie in the front. He did a beautiful job on this. Now, do keep in mind, with these images, this is just how I would change it. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's the only way. There's an infinite amount of possibilities out there, you know, that would all still work. But hopefully, seeing a visual example kind of puts in line what is possible out there. Now, here's a Throwie I really don't mind too much. You know, honestly, when I see Throwies from new graffiti artists, it brings me back to my first Throwie, which absolutely sucked for a good 6 years. My first 6 years of graffiti, I was abysmal, and this is a much better attempt than what I had. So, to fix this and to help it out, we want to kind of normalize some of the shapes. We see that you have a little bit of an angular top to the B, but a predominantly round structure for the bowls. You have these weird kind of counters for the B, though, that we're certainly going to want to address. Your O's are what you'd expect, typical, but the shape isn't always clean, and that's something that we're going to want to work on. We're going to want to work on not only line, but shape as well. The N is really angular, and that's definitely something that we're going to have to change in order to be a little bit more in line with the B as well as the O, and the I as well. Now, you can have some angular bits as you do on the B and the I, so we'll try and keep a few, but we also want to add a bit more roundness to the letter. And once we make those changes, you can see we have a little bit more of a refined Throwie. This is how I would do the Throwie, and if I was having a good time, this is how I would actually rock this name. You'll notice we really didn't change the Throwie all that much. We just refined the shapes, repositioned things a little bit, and changed a slight bit of the structure, but overall, it's largely the same. As one of his first Throwies, maybe even his first Throwie, I think a solid 2 out of 10 isn't bad. My first Throwie was a solid 0 out of 10, so I think that's a really good place to start. For this image, I actually used the brush pack that we have over on the online store. We have brushes that simulate realistic fat caps and flares and things like that, and I'll be honest, man, I had a blast using this. Now we got Depo, somebody who actually gets up where I'm from. I see this guy up quite a bit. He does incredible work. I love his Philly hand styles, and I love his Throwies, but a lot of times his straight letters and pieces have features that are just straight up a Throwie. That's not necessarily a bad thing. This is pretty dope as it is. But Depo is a writer's writer. The guy gets up and it shows when he does pieces because once again, they kind of look like Throwies in certain areas. So one of the first things we want to do, I want to take that D right there and I want to make it more of a straight letter. I want to keep the overall details here. I want to keep how the P extends over to the left-hand side to connect with the D and how the E actually extends through the P to go to the O. I want to keep things like that as well as the extension on the top of the O. It's something that Depo does quite a bit, but here, when he does it, he adds this bit of negative space that kind of distorts the structure just a little bit, and it makes the extension more contrived. Something similar happens on the E, where he actually uses an extrusion from the P to extend out to the left-hand side, creating the very top portion of the structure for the E. Now, this only happens one time, and at this point, he's got a lot of things that only happen one time that's kind of breaking up flow. So we're going to help to bring a little bit more harmony to this image by turning the D into a straight letter. We're going to want to connect the top of the E to the actual rest of the body in order to develop more structure there. But we'll still keep the connection from the top of the E to the P. We'll get rid of the negative space on the O, and we'll keep the extension on the O as it is pretty much. Now, we also added this arrow over on the top left of the D in order to match the one that's on the right-hand side. But here's the final image. I like what Depo had. I didn't really want to change too much, but I feel like this helps bring it more into that straight letter area. I like what Depo had here. I'm gonna give this a solid 7 out of 10. But dudes, let me know what you think link in the comments down below. And if you ever want to share your work with me, just tag me over on Instagram. Now if you'd like to check out more graffiti rating videos, we have this one down here at the bottom. And up here you'll find the best how to do graffiti tutorials anywhere online. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys next week.